Hey there, this is Cliff. We're going to continue on with project management course at NBCC. These are looking at our final chapters. This is the project implementation or project execution overview. So after you have carefully planned your project, you will be ready to start the project implementation or execution phase, the third phase of the project management lifecycle. The execution phase involves putting the project plan into action. It's here where the project manager will coordinate and direct project resources to meet the objectives of the project plan as the project unfolds. It's the project manager's job to direct and manage each activity, each step of the way. So this is our agenda. We're going to talk about implementation. Also in the PMBOK model is called the execution phase. Talk a little about the change control. So these are the steps that are involved when you have to change something during the execution phase. And then we're going to review how or what it looks like when you have to do something like schedule compression, when things maybe don't go as well as planned. So the implementation or execution phase is where you and your project team actually do the project work to produce the deliverables. The steps undertaken to build each deliverable will vary depending on the type of project you are undertaking and cannot therefore be described here in any real detail. For instance, engineering and telecommunications projects will focus on using equipment, resources, and materials to construct each project deliverable, whereas computer software projects may require the development and implementation of software code routines to produce each project deliverable. Your job as a project manager is to direct the work, but you need to do more than deliver the results. You also need to keep track of how well your team performs. The implementation phase keeps the project plan on track with careful monitoring and control processes to ensure the final deliverables meet the acceptance criteria set by the customer. When you find a problem, you can't just make a change because it may be too expensive or take too long to do. You will need to look at how it affects the triple constraint, time, cost, and scope, and how it impacts project quality. You will then have to figure out if it's worth making the change. If you evaluate the impact of the change and find that it won't have an impact on the project triple constraint, then you can make the change without going through the change control. Change control is a set of procedures that lets you make changes in an organized way. So let's talk about that process. So anytime you need to make a change to your plan, you must start with a change request. This is a document that either you or the person making the request must complete. Any change to your project must be documented so you can figure out what needs to be done, by when, and by whom. It's very common in construction is to have this called an RFI or request for information. All right, these are usually logged in a database somewhere. Sometimes they're done through emails if it's a very small job, but on most modern day jobs, it's a formality that you're going to do. So once the change request is documented, it is submitted to a change control board. A change control board is a group of people who consider changes for approval. Not every change control system has a board, but most do. Sometimes the change control board can be a project management team. Sometimes it can be through a project manager then takes it to the stakeholders and they review it. Sometimes there's a group, so sometimes there's a designer, a project manager that might be looking after the owner and the site contractor. So sometimes these change review boards can be a bunch of different people. Putting the recommended changes through change control will help you evaluate the impact and update all the necessary documents. Not all changes are approved, but if the changes are approved, you send them back to the team to put them in place. For example, if you guys are doing your senior project report and you want to make a change, usually that would be as say they were going to be building something, the change would go out as an RFI, you're requesting for information. That will likely come back either approved or rejected depending on what the actual thing that you want to be changed is. So let's talk about schedule compression. So when you have to make these changes, right, the schedule can likely, will obviously change during that request. So when you absolutely have to meet the date and you're running behind, you can sometimes find ways to do activities more quickly by adding more resources to critical path tasks. That's called crashing. Crashing the schedule means adding resources or moving them around to bring the project back into line with the schedule. Crashing always costs more and doesn't always work. There's no way to crash the schedule without raising the overall cost of the budget. So if the budget is fixed and you don't have any extra money to spend, you can't use this technique. Sometimes you've got two activities planned to occur in sequence, but you can't actually do them at the same time. This is called fast tracking. This is called fast tracking the project. On a software project, you might do both your user acceptance testing and your functional testing at the same time, for example. This is pretty risky. There's a good chance you might need to redo some of the work you have done concurrently. Crashing and fast tracking are schedule compression tools. Managing a schedule change means keeping all of your schedule documents up to date. That way, you will always be comparing your results to the correct plan. Crashing isn't always necessarily bad. If you have to do a roof, for example, and only two guys show up to do your roof, in a roof job, usually you can put more people on it because someone can be doing one section of the roof and then another one can be laying it just behind them, another one just behind that. So that can work. Flooring is the same way. When you're laying out flooring, sometimes it's more advantageous to have multiple people. Quality is one of those things you have to watch out for in crashing and both fast tracking. As more people come, you have to make sure that the quality of the work is being still kept throughout that the work that's being done. So to complete, after the deliverables have been physically constructed and accepted by the customer, phase review is carried out to determine whether the project is complete and ready for closure. So the implementation or when the execution phase is completed, all the deliverables should be constructed. The customer will have accepted that all the work has been completed to a certain extent. We're going to get into the next section where we talk about where if there are certain pieces that need to be reviewed or the work isn't up to quality, the closeout phase is usually that final piece where we make sure everything's done. And review the phase to determine if the project is ready for closure. Each phase as it closes should be signed off by the stakeholders or the project sponsor to ensure that the work has been done. Usually the execution phase is one of the major costs for completion. So a lot of the money has been spent. So you want to make sure that when this phase is ending, that the stakeholders, are knowledgeable that a lot of money is going to be going out and being paid for most of the things that have been done. So again, if you have any questions about this specific phase, please either send a message through Teams or just email me. We're going to go through the Green Oasis project. So this is kind of one that we've been running through the whole time. And we're going to talk about the execution phase. So this is a scenario based called crashing the schedule. All right, so we're going to crash a section of this Green Oasis project. So in the Green Oasis Park project, the project team faced a tight deadline to complete the construction and landscaping phases to coincide with a community event. In an attempt to meet the deadline, the project manager decided to crash the schedule by adding more resources and working overtime to accelerate the project. So let's go through some of the things that happened. So when the crashing the schedule required hiring additional labor and working extended hours, leading to increased labor costs. The budget did not initially account for the extra expenses associated with crashing the schedule, causing financial strain on the project. So one negative about the crashing is we had an increased cost, we have more people involved, and we're going to be doing overtime, which usually is an additional cost. So this was an unexpected amount. Another thing that can happen, like I said before, is quality. So the quality compromise, so the accelerated pace led to compromises in the quality of the work as workers were under pressure to meet tight deadlines. Rushed construction and landscaping activities resulted in errors, rework, and decreased overall quality of the park. Safety concerns was another thing. So the increased workload and tight timelines raised safety concerns as workers were fatigued and working long hours. Accidents and incidents on the construction site increased due to the pressure to meet the accelerated schedule. There was also community disruption, so extended working hours and construction activities disrupted the local community, leading to complaints from residents. Noise and disturbances resulted in a strained relationship between the project team and the community. So in conclusion, the strategy resulted in an increased cost, compromised quality, safety concerns, community breakdown, community disruption, and unrealistic expectations. While the intention behind the crashing the project schedule in the Greenhouse project was to meet a specific deadline, the strategy resulted in the things that were on the screen. The scenario highlights the importance of carefully evaluating the implications of schedule crashing and considering the project's overall success factors beyond meeting a particular timeline. So some of the remedies could be in this case that if there was a function to be held, they could have asked to postpone it, or if this was, say, a very important function, to have it on a specific section that was completed on time, and then maybe fence the rest off to make sure that no one actually impeded the work that was being completed. If you log in and look at these PowerPoints or download them, you'll see that there's some practice questions here, right? There's 2 practice questions that I hope will be helpful for the next quiz. Again, if you have any questions about this video, please message me or reach out to me by email.